Okay, the world keeps turning. Time keeps moving on. So we've been talking about the Middle Ages, and the world spinning around keeps going. So today we're going to talk about the end of the Middle Ages. We talked about the fall of the Roman Empire. We kind of marked the beginning of the Middle Ages. Now we're going to talk about some things that happened that kind of brought the Middle Ages to a close. Even though, again, people are living there, it's just their life. They just keep rolling along. So we're going to talk about some of those things. And here's a list of some things that contributed to changes. So changes were going on. Things were happening as time went by. So in the thousands and the 1100s and the 1200s and the 1300s, leading up to the 1400s, these were some things that were happening that were already beginning the changes that would mark the end of the Middle Ages. So talk to the people around you about what some things that you think might have contributed to the end of the Middle Ages. So the end of the Middle Ages, we're seeing the rise of cities. So some people stopped living on the manors, on the little, remember the little pieces of land that each noble might have or each knight might have, and they had all the peasants that were working, or the serfs that were working on that land, that were kind of bound to the land. Well, one of the things that happened at the end of the Crusades is, remember, we had more and more trade. So people were making money, people are getting wealthy. So that was leading to some changes. Also, farming was improving. They were learning things about farming that helped them grow more food. They had more land to use. They were using better tools. They were doing better techniques. So that means more food. And if you have an excess of food, you can sell some of it and make money. So people are making more money. Technology was changing. And I'll let you do some research on some things that were happening in technology. Commerce just means trade. So the rise of the merchant class. So before, remember, in our system, we had the peasants all down at the bottom, and then the next step up were the knights or the nobles, and then the king and queen on top. Well, now we've got a whole group of people that were just merchants. They were just business people. They were buying and selling things. Some of the peasants were making enough money on the side that they were able to buy their own freedom from the land, and they were moving to the city. Then we're going to talk about politics more in a minute. So here's some of the factors. Why do you think that some of these things, and why would the rise of cities lead to the system of feudalism and religion that everything was kind of based on during the Middle Ages? Why would that start to fall apart a little bit with the rise of cities? So talk about what you know about cities and how that might contribute to the end of the Middle Ages. Remember, one of the things we talked about before when we were talking about famine and the Black Death, these two things, famine and disease, led to a lower population. They lost in those days between 1/4 and 1/3 of the population. One interesting thing that you might want to do some research on is what the population was in Europe before the famine, before the Black Death, and what was it afterwards. But this led to a lower population. So if you think about your feudalistic system where all the labor is done by the peasant classes down at the bottom, how would that have to change? And what kind of things would develop with technology and so forth, because you have fewer people to do the work? So what do you have to do about that? So talk about that for a minute. So one of the things that kind of brought the whole feudalistic system began to decline a little bit was the effort in some parts of the world to limit the power of kings. In England, King John was the king of England, and before him, kings had lots of power to do basically whatever they wanted to, as long as they could get people to defend them and support them through the armies and so forth. But the Magna Carta was a document that was signed by the king and a group of nobles, And the nobles basically said, we're going to limit how much power you have. And since all the nobles got together as a force, they had enough power that they were able to force King John to sign this document, which basically is Latin. It stands for Great Charter. And that meant that the nobles would have some power, and it was kind of the beginning of the modern Parliament in England, where they still have a House of Lords and House of Commons. In those days, it was just the Lords that had political power, and also a model that has been used by other countries, including the United States, when we came up with our Senate and our House of Representatives. But the Magna Carta was one of the first documents that limited the power of a leader, and was a model for many other documents that came afterwards, including the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. So talk about what effect you think that would have on the world to limit the power of kings and create a group of people that may have some say in the government. One event that came towards the end of the Middle Ages was the 100 Years' War, which was a war that was fought between Britain and France. They were fighting over some land. And one of the key characters in that struggle was a young lady named Joan of Arc, which you may have heard. This war basically occurred between 1337 and 1453, so it lasted quite a while, a little bit more than 100 years. But that took a big toll on both countries. Also during this time, there was some new technology that was being introduced, including crossbow, I hate to interrupt you, Mr. Russ, but one thing you forgot to say was that some of the longbows and crossbows could pierce armor, so that would make a knight in armor a little less effective as a tool in battle, and also soldiers in armor. On both countries. Also during this time, there was some new technology that was being introduced, including crossbow, including cannons that use gunpowder, and also some other devices that could be used to hurl big stones or big weights at castle walls. So castles became less effective as a military strategy during this period of time. So let's talk a minute about what the effect of the war could have been, what the effect of this new technology would have been, and as far as future struggles or future wars, future military actions. Okay, a couple other things that's changed at the very end of the Middle Ages and beginning of the next period, modern period of history. Reformation refers to the Catholic Church and how a guy named Martin Luther, who was a priest in the Catholic Church, decided to kind of rebel against some of the church practices. He wrote a famous paper that he nailed on the church door protesting certain practices of the church, including indulgences where you could pay to have your sins forgiven. He also translated the Bible into the German language, which meant more people could read it. He believed people should make decisions for themselves and read the Bible and understand the Bible for themselves. The other thing was the Renaissance, which is a French word for reawakening, I believe. You can look that up. But in the Renaissance, lots of artists and philosophers and scientists were kind of looking back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome to kind of reawaken in learning, reawaken thinking, scientific thinking. They believed in trying to bring back the beautiful arts from the ancient civilizations, Greece and Rome, and also the thinking. They were big into science. Leonardo da Vinci is an example of somebody that was a scientist. He was also an artist, a great thinker. So those are some things. So think about what would it be about a new way of thinking about things. How would that change the times? How would that change the way people worked together, interacted together? Why would that bring about the end of the Middle Ages? It's been great talking to you about the Middle Ages. There's no way I've covered everything, so I want you to think about some things that you might be interested in researching, and maybe you can even find out there may be some mistakes in here that I've made. So you should always question your learning, always question your teachers, and keep learning, keep finding out new things.